Welcome to the Who's Left podcast, a show about Indiana politics, history, and culture from an unapologetically leftist perspective. I'm Scott Aaron Rogers, recording from Bloomington, and this is an emergency episode. This Wednesday, the Indianapolis Local Education Alliance, a 9-person body created by the state government under the guise of reforming the public school system in Indianapolis, will make their final recommendations regarding the future of IPS. The board has already whittled their options down to two completely undemocratic governance models that take power away from the elected school board and put it in the hands of the mayor and his charter school allies. My guest is a concerned IPS parent, Tayler Sullivan-Peters. He'll tell us all about ILEA, the players involved, and their proposals. We'll close with a call to action for Hoosiers who value public education and democracy. Let's jump right in. All right. Good morning, Tayler Sullivan-Peters. Welcome to the Who's Left podcast.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
I appreciate you joining me here today. Very concerning stuff going on up there in Indianapolis around the public schools. Indianapolis, a Democratic city, the largest population center in our state, run by Democrats. And yet we have a charter school movement basically in the process of taking over the public schools with
Right.
the help of the Democratic mayor, Joe Hogsett, and some of his allies. Is that an accurate way to sort of talk about what's
That
going on up
is,
there?
yeah, I would certainly say it's been sort of a long process of takeover. But yeah, at least right now in our current situation, it is the sort of privatization style takeover with this charter movement is, like you said, being primarily led by Democratic mayor, Democratic city county council members, et cetera.
And there is a major meeting where they're going to make a big decision
Hmm.
on this matter coming up this week on
That's
Wednesday.
right. Yeah, that's right. This Wednesday, this recently formed body called the ILEA, oh, now you're going to have to give me a second. I'm
That
blanking
is
right
the
in the moment.
Indianapolis
Indianapolis
Local Education Alliance, I believe.
Local Education Alliance. Thank you. Yeah, the reason I can't remember the acronym is because it is brand new. It was actually formed out of SB1. You might remember this sort of big education package bill that was passed in the last legislative session this year in 2025. There were a lot of controversial pieces going into that having to do with funding, how things were sliced and diced. And that was sort of a big bill, a lot of stuff in there. One of the things was the formation of this Indianapolis Local Education Alliance, which was sort of initially tasked with making facilities level and transportation level recommendations to the state legislature about what next step should be with IPS, how we ought to sort of move forward, try to improve, try to fix things that aren't working in IPS. And we sort of knew going into the formation, the way that the sort of the pieces were coming together, that this looked like, oh, this is not going to be some sort of public input body. This is going to be something that's sort of stacked with folks who are sort of one disposition with respect to public schooling. And that disposition is let's move further down the charter path and all of that. And so, yes, this body
Yeah,
that's meeting on
so
Wednesday is that ILEA. They've got their final meeting. They don't technically have any legislative power. They have the power to make a recommendation to our Republican supermajority legislature, which is going to have their next legislative session this early winter.
why was this ILEA created by the state? I guess
Yeah.
IPS, and uh, I guess let me start over there and say, Indianapolis schools are sort of this mishmash currently
Right.
of your traditional public schools, IPS, and then
Right.
you've got this mishmash of charter schools, which are privately held, not beholden to a democratically elected school board,
Right.
and um, so there's this sort of patchwork education system in
Yep.
Indianapolis now, and the ILEA wants to make it work better together, or is that
Yeah.
sort of their
So
framing?
yeah, I think ostensibly, I think you're exactly right. I mean, the public school system in Indianapolis, like you said, is a mishmash, is a patchwork. There's a lot of pieces, and a lot of this goes back a really long time, sort of with the influx of sort of charters and breaking out from IPS. And there is a lot of complexity around things like how do we manage our facilities? How are students getting transported to school? And some of this complexity is actually heightened by these sort of charters that come into the system, and they don't. So you're exactly right. They're not beholden to public control, but they are funded by public money. But that money, as you might expect, given I don't know, just general fights about funding for public education, there is not enough of it to go around, especially as more and more schools are opening all the time. And when I say more and more schools, I mean there are 8 charter authorizers in Indiana,
Oh,
and
wow.
there are a lot of those that are just, and I mean, and they can authorize around the state, but a lot of the charter density in the state is in Indianapolis. And so we've got schools that are opening sort of very regularly, and there's a lot of shuffling. And what that has to do, what the net result of that is that the funding is spread further and further. And so we've got these challenges. We've got, there are academic challenges, there are specials challenges. And when I say specials, I mean, math, I'm not, excuse me, not math, music class, extracurriculars. And then we've also got this challenges of how do we get kids to school? There just aren't enough buses. There aren't enough bus drivers. So there are problems that need to be solved. And ostensibly, ILEA was sort of formed to start making recommendations for that. Uh, but as soon as we sort of saw, folks who were stalking that board, it was very clear the sort of, like I said earlier, the disposition of the board, the direction it might
Yeah.
tend to lean.
So I guess why do we need this ILEA in the first place? That
Yeah,
because we have this patchwork. Now, I mean,
yeah,
obviously, it hasn't always been this way. Charter schools are kind of
right.
a newish concept, and
Yep,
certainly these schools getting public money
yep,
via vouchers is an even newer
yep,
concept. Yes.
yep, yeah. So, to be totally honest, I'd argue that the ILEA is probably, we're often calling it ILEA, ILEA, however you. Uh, I would argue that it's not needed. I think that we have governance bodies in place that can make recommendations in organizations. For example, the IPS school board, this democratically elected board of commissioners, who is specifically there to manage IPS and to coordinate things within the system. The sort of, again, like the legislative reason is these legislators looked at, oh, well, IPS is a mess. There's a lot of charters. There's these innovation schools. There's private schools getting vouchers. There's all this sort of disparate things. We need some new body to come in so we can, I don't know, hire a bunch of new, legislative recommendation folks and sort of have all these sort of additional layers of complexity, because that's sort of the direction that a lot of this always wants to move in. So we can make new recommendations with a new body. And to my mind, it's not necessary. We have folks who have been in it for a long time and who are, like I said, democratically elected and in the position to make these recommendations already.
So, I guess let's talk about the ILEA and who is on it.
Sure.
Now, one of the folks on this is former Mayor Bart Peterson, and
Right.
he kind of is the father, one would
Yeah.
say, of the Indianapolis charter school experiment.
Yes. That's so. I mean, I'll confess that I don't have the deep historical knowledge on sort of Peterson's legislative history, but yeah, my that's basically Peterson sort of led the charge of the influx of charters back in the, I want to say the early 2000s, or the aughts is around, I think, when all of
Mhm.
this sort of started to really pick up speed. And he's also sort of very closely involved with an organization called the Mind Trust, which is a local organization that is sort of a pro-charter, non-governmental organization. They have done everything from sort of making legislative recommendations to different legislative bodies to, in fact, the Enroll Indy program, the program that, so I'm a DSA member, but I mean to say I'm an IPS parent. My son's in kindergarten in IPS, and when we enrolled, we used this web portal called Enroll Indy. And Enroll Indy is how you go on and you're in this sort of, you rank the schools you want to go to, and then eventually you find out, okay, you've been slotted here. And again, this is all stuff that, again, personally, that seems like a sort of an unhinged way of structuring public education. But we did it because that's what you do. But Enroll Indy is sort of a technological structure that the Mind Trust was sort of very, very important to bringing to Indianapolis. It's this, again, it's this sort of outside technological infrastructure that we're sort of integrating into the way that we run public schools. And I'm not not saying that we don't need technological infrastructure, but I'm just saying that that's sort of the context of who the Mind Trust are. And Peterson has a very deep connection with them. I think he was involved with the formation of it, but you'd have to
Hmm.
fact check me on that.
Yeah, and I will. We'll take care of that in the show notes.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
but Peterson's not the only person associated with the Mind Trust on this ILEA board, right?
that is true. That's true. And I don't have all of my notes in front of me, so you might have to help me a little bit. But I understand that we've got City County Councilor Maggie Lewis, who has some close connections with the Mind Trust. And then I'll have to slow down a little bit and pull up the rest of my notes. Let me
Sure.
give me
Well, I
one more second. I don't
understand
have all the
that
names at the top
Ms.
of my head.
Lewis is not only a board member of the Mind Trust, but she is also a board member of the Cathedral High School,
That's right.
a
That's
private
right. Yeah,
Catholic
one of
school,
privates. Yeah.
which is another with the vouchers, another hand, I guess, another handout for public money, right?
Right.
Not it's not
Yep.
just the charters, it's also religious schools.
Right. And yeah, I think there's this big group in Indiana called the Indiana Public Education Coalition, IPCE. At any rate,
Yes,
it's a
yes.
it's a group of there are Republican former mayors in there. It's a sort of a bipartisan large group making sort of recommendations about what we ought to do about public education, and they are really great because they've got a lot of very smart lawyers who do a lot of deep research into the financials. And they've got a graphic that they've been sharing to your point about the vouchers and all of this sort of about the sort of way that money is funneled again, because there's this pot of money that can go to education, and there's all these holes in the pot, and they're going to vouchers, and they're going to charters and all of these different places. So yeah, absolutely, with regards to her connection both with the Mind Trust as well as Cathedral and private.
And we've mentioned these vouchers a couple times. Indiana has gone to a universal what they call school choice system,
Right,
right?
right, right, right. Yep,
Where all students are eligible for these vouchers. They say, the money follows the student or whatever. Again, at least
sure.
that's their framing, but we need to talk for a second about where this idea of school vouchers comes from. It was excuse me, it's not new. This
Hmm.
came directly out of the backlash against Brown versus the Board of Education in
Absolutely. Yep.
1954. There were school systems in the South that, rather than integrate, they just closed their public schools entirely.
Yep.
And states like Virginia at that time bandied about this idea of vouchers to give to students to attend private schools, private whites only schools, right?
Right, right.
Um, and in a way to take public money and have it, follow the student, so they wouldn't have to integrate their public
Right.
schools in that way. And it's not so overt anymore, but
Mhm.
in a way,
Right.
that's sort of what vouchers are doing now.
Yep. Yeah. No, I would agree. I think that, I mean, a lot of this stuff, a lot of these sort of, what we call them complexities, but really what it is, it's sort of like systemically baked in inequities, sort of all sourced back from this sort of, like you said, the school choice history. And the school choice history comes from exactly right, like Brown v. Board of Education type stuff, where nice white parents in the cities didn't want to integrate their schools, or they didn't want to have to tolerate busing or anything like this. So,
And that's why we get to a point where Indianapolis public schools are bleeding money. It's white flight, right? It's
yep.
white people leaving, going out in the suburbs, going out to Carmel, going down to
Right.
Greenwood, going out to Zionsville, right? They
Absolutely.
don't want
Yep.
their kids to be in schools with children of color, and they take their tax dollars with them. And that's why
Right.
you see such disparities where these suburban schools have these sprawling campuses
That's
and
exactly right. Yeah.
massive performing arts centers and state of the art
Yeah.
Olympic swimming pools, and IPS is struggling.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that sort of, I mean, when you sort of zoom all the way out from that perspective, and I think that's a really important perspective to have on the way public education functions, is when you the way that public education is funded is by property taxes. And it follows exactly that in these sort of suburban enclaves where there are these larger, more expensive houses that are sort of tilted in favor of property ownership, which is to say that more people in the suburbs own their home versus rent, the actual public dollars that can come from property tax base is significantly larger. So you have a school like Carmel Public High School, which has these humongous, beautiful, brand new facilities. Whereas you come to Indianapolis, where there is, a much significantly larger body of folks who are renting their homes, and you know, often, very likely, if you're renting your home, it is because you do not have these sort of like historical generational wealth, or even just the wealth from your own current, your economic class that you're in right now. You don't have that money available for a down payment on an expensive home, and so you're renting, and so you're not paying into the property tax fund. And maybe your landlord is. It's your landlord is, of course, but it's this way that the financial distribution of property tax money happens and breaks down, and there is just a lower property tax base in a dense urban city, and it's unable to sort of sustain the facilities in the same way that it would in a suburban area.
And so in that situation, you'd think it would be incumbent on, excuse me, on the local schools to pool those resources and do
Sure.
what they can with them.
Right.
And but instead you've got the vultures circling, right?
Right.
And
Yep.
that's what it seems to me like these
Yep.
charters and these private schools with their hands in the public money pot
Right.
are doing. And back to the ILEA, we
Mhm.
talked about Peterson. The mayor
Yep.
himself is on the board. Councilor Lewis is on the board. You've also got Andrew Neal is on the board. He's married to the director of operations of the Mine Trust. You've
That's right.
got
Yep.
Toby McClamrock from Marion University, and this is a Republican former majority leader of the city council, chair
Yep.
of the board at Marion, and Marion is also one of these charter authorizers
One of the
that
charter
you mentioned.
authorizers. Exactly. Yep. Yep. Yes.
So, I
That's it.
mean,
Yep.
like,
Totally.
is there any democratic, publicly elected public school representation on this board at all?
There is. Yeah. So it's a 9-member board, and 7 of them sort of fall into this bucket of what I would call pro privatization, pro charter, so on and so forth. We've discussed a few of those names, and then there are 2 folks on the board who are more on the end of public school advocates. And one of those people is Tina Algren. She's a middle school math teacher in IPS. She is a parent of IPS students, and she's also a union bargaining rep. And then also the superintendent of the IPS board, Alicia Johnson. She is also, and of course, being on the IPS board, she has a tilt towards public education. I will say that she has sort of historically sort of towed the line between collaboration with these sort of charter forces and public school advocacy. But I think that especially in the last year or so, as things have heated up, she has become much more of a full-throated advocate for the public options.
I mean, she's got to be in a tough spot, but also, she
Sure.
she can see the deck is stacked.
Yeah.
Yeah, and about that, look, we just coming out of a week where our state legislature, our state senate, um, rejected the President Trump's
Hmm.
gambit to steal a couple congressional seats from Indiana.
Yep.
I mean, we recognize the inherent unfairness of it. We said that's stacking the deck. We reject this,
Right.
especially Democrats organized. We rallied. We made phone calls to say we don't do that here. We don't stack the deck here. And then here you've got Democrats in Indianapolis. Looks like stacking the deck against public
Absolutely.
schools.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would completely agree with that. And it's just, I mean, I don't know what to say other than that it's sort of a deeply unfortunate and deeply problematic place to be in. And that is why we as DSA, along with our coalition partners, have been so activated to fight this as hard as we can to sort of come out in favor of, a public school system that provides equity, serves all students, has democratic control, has public input, is transparent. These are all these critically important features of public school that we're sort of trying to hold the line on and push back and have a positive vision for. In a situation where, like you said, the deck is fairly stacked right now, but we do have optimism that we can continue to push.
So let's talk about what that looks like. We talk about the deck being stacked. What are they to what ends are they stacking it? What is ILEA up to?
Right.
What
Yeah.
are they doing with this stacked deck? Where they
Yeah.
can essentially do whatever they want. They had I saw we talked about it on the Sunday show a few weeks ago.
Uh-huh.
They had these like four different government model
Right.
proposals to sort
Right.
of bring IPS and these charters under one umbrella, and
Uh-huh.
it was like each one, the first option wasn't super terrible. You could
Right.
quibble about it, but
Maintain
it
the
was
power of the IPS board. Yeah.
relatively democratic. But then each of the four different models they proposed was less democratic than the last,
That's
where
right.
you get to the last one, I think, and basically the mayor is ruling over the public schools like a king and
Right.
appointing hand-picked members. Did I
That's right.
read that correctly?
Yeah, you read that absolutely correctly. We, like you said, there were sort of four options, and I honestly think, to the sort of credit of the organizers who have been taking up and going to all of these ILEA meetings all throughout this fall, we sort of forced the ILEA to publicize these four plans. I think that there's a reality where, had there not been such a public outcry to all this stuff sort of happening behind closed doors, we might never have seen these graphics. And I say graphics because I think they, at one time, they created and released these sort of flow charts of, this person reports to this person's in charge of
Mm.
X, and yeah, like you said, they sort of are, they kind of go one to four, and with four being the sort of, it's a fully, it's not elected. These are all people that are being handpicked by, like you said, the mayor of Indianapolis. And it's sort of a shoring up of power in sort of one mayoral seat, and a sort of resting of power from, like I said, the duly elected, democratically elected IPS school board. And transparently, I don't agree with the positions of everyone on the IPS school board, but they were all duly elected. And of course the mayor was too. Sure, you can say that, but it's my opinion that we should not have the entirety of control of this sort of diffuse and complex system that needs to be serving individual students, individual families as best they can in all of these neighborhoods and all of these unique situations. We simply can't just sort of centralize all of that. That needs to be sort of, or it needs to have sort of democratic community input and public input, not one sort of king. We sort of jokingly refer to Mayor Hogsett sometimes as Little King Hogsett, and that
Right.
is sort of precisely the way that they're sort of moving with the way those governance models were structured.
And they whittled it down from four to two
They did.
at a meeting a couple weeks ago.
They did. Yes. Yep.
And this meeting, it was at like 4 o'clock in
Right.
the afternoon
Right.
when teachers are probably still finishing up their workday,
Yeah.
when parents are, some of them are still in the pickup line, right, at
Oh yeah.
this point.
I was in the
And
pickup line for my son, who was in kindergarten, at 4 o'clock when this meeting was taking place. I wasn't able to get over there that day because I needed to help pick up my son from school, because that is a commitment that I have, obviously, to my family.
so the actual stakeholders, who these people are nominally making decisions on their behalf, they're not even really invited to the table.
Exactly. That's precisely what I'm saying. Kind of just to, it always in my mind loops back to this democratic control, public input, serving the public. It seems so transparently clear to me, when you schedule a meeting for 4 o'clock on a school day, to whittle down the governance options that you're proposing to a governance option that removes public and democratically elected control. And you do that during a time when the sort of populace who will be most impacted by this can't even attend. I know several teachers who wanted to attend to sort of make their voice heard. If they couldn't go, they were at school. Like I said, myself, several other teacher friends, I'm sorry, excuse me, parent friends at my school couldn't make it. Uh,
Wow.
and
And
I'm really lucky
that was a
to.
pretty decent turnout. Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. I'm really lucky, and I really feel, or I don't personally feel lucky. I think we are lucky, sort of collectively, that we have, a fairly robust group of coalition partners who have been sort of, nose at the grindstone, so to speak, organizing, trying to get as many folks out, because something that someone said to me once that I think about all the time with respect to sort of community public organizing is we organize because we can't all be everywhere all the time. So when I can't be someplace, the reason why we're organizing is so that we have this thick community, so that when I can't be there, someone else can be there. And yes, we did have a good turnout. And yes, there was a lot of public outcry at that meeting and after, because it's a sort of like it's just bald facedly sort of pulling public control away from the people of Indianapolis.
And despite the good turnout, despite the overwhelming public comment, against what they're up to here, like we said, the fix is in. They
Yep.
whittle their 4 decisions down to 2, and wouldn't
Yep.
you know it, it's the 2 least democratic models that are essentially
Yeah.
up for consideration
That's
coming up
right.
here this week, right?
That is right. That's completely right. Yep. And
So
yeah.
I guess we talked about the Hogsett as king appointing everybody model. I mean, what's the slightly better option that's on the table?
Yeah, I apologize. I don't have the details of the first org chart up right in front of me. But the first model, the model, so there was a list of 4 models. Model number 1 was the one that sort of retained closest to the status quo of the IPS the IPS school board's power as it is today, in terms of the way that charter authorization is completed, in terms of the way that facilities are managed, and all of those types of things. And that's, to my mind, again, that's not an ideal structure. We're often put in these positions where we're sort of having to fight back tooth and nail. But I'll say that beyond this sort of these 4 options, those of us at DSA, the Democratic Socialists, along with our coalition partners, the IPS Parent Council, concerned clergy, the IEA, the Indianapolis Education Association, the Teachers Union in Indianapolis, we, the very next day, this was December 3rd, this meeting we're talking about. The very next day, on December 4th, we held a press conference that was also quite well attended. And we really appreciated all the folks who came out and all the media coverage we were able to get for what we're referring to as our people's proposal. So this is a sort of a 5th option for governance for IPS, because we think it is important to come to the table with a positive vision of the way that things can look. We're not just going to say no, 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 no about all the things on this list. We're going to say this is how we think it should be. And the way we think it should be is that we provide this power that I think is democratically elected power to a school board to manage the facilities, to manage the transportation, and to centralize and to remove this sort of diffuse, confusing structure of charter authorization and put it under a democratically elected heading. And so we sort of, take away these sort of unilateral charter authorizers that are out there, and we instead have a democratically elected board that is in charge of this authorization. So that's what we're referring to as the people's proposal. And we're really fortunate to have some legislators at the Indiana state level. Andrea Hunley sort of signed on and endorsed our platform because we think it's a good positive vision for the future of IPS.
Right, and it's not like some raging out there plan. I mean, like
Absolutely
myself,
not.
I'm like, oh, we should close down all these charters, and we not a penny of public money should go to a religious school. But you guys are like, listen, we understand what we're working with
Right.
here.
Absolutely.
We still have to work with the state. They put
Yeah.
a lot of pressure on the city. We still have to deal with these charter schools. They exist. This is the reality on the
Right.
ground.
Right.
So it is a thoughtful plan taking those things into account.
Absolutely. I think a sort of core value of mine politically is that we have to sort of maintain and think about the sort of like the dignity of the people that we're serving at all time. I think providing for dignity of folks in a political system is one of the most critical things possible. And we wouldn't I wouldn't personally be able to sort of brook a plan that is sort of going to completely just again rip up this whole system and sort of raise everything to the ground. In the same way that I don't want to have these schools, these charter schools opening and closing mid-year and all of this churn. I think it comes back to the sort of like dignity and community and care for the students and the families and the teachers. And Yeah, absolutely. That's like, I mean, I'm with you. I don't think that in my heart of hearts, I think that there should be zero charter schools, but I understand that the reality we're working with is we'll have to get there eventually.
In this space, what basically what I do, I'm looking at things through a critical lens. We're critical of capitalism and
Yeah. Yeah.
in favor of the public goods, education being one of the most important public goods. And really, what we've seen is over these years a cracking of a democratic system, first defunding it through the white flight, right? Then, oh, well, there's no money. Now we're in crisis. We need to, come up with a solution to fix this
Right.
manufactured crisis. And
Yep.
the solution is to, introduce market forces.
Yep.
And capitalists and their apologists always like to talk about the efficiency of the
Hmm.
market. And it seems like when you have a patchwork system like this with all these charters, with the public schools still in there, with the private schools in there, it's making things unnecessarily complicated,
I
unnecessarily
absolutely.
inefficient.
Yep.
It's adding artificial gates, artificial borders
Yep.
around education, at which somebody is going to extract a toll.
Yep. Absolutely. No, I think that I mean, I always sort of, something that's important to think about too is in these situations where there are the sort of, financialization and the sort of like neoliberal sort of bringing in of outside private economic forces. It's like who has the what is it? The resources, the wherewithal, the time, the bandwidth to navigate these things and to benefit from them. It's the sort of exact same folks who might, in a couple of years, the wealthy, white, well-off, upper class folks who might, in a couple of years, move out to the suburbs and go to Carmel High School or something. Anyhow, the people who are most left behind by a sort of market structure system with our schools or with healthcare. I think I always reach for the analogy to healthcare because I don't care about any sort of marketplace. I just want to go to a doctor that will help me be healthy. In the same way that I don't care about some marketplace of schools, I want my child to have a safe education environment where he can learn to read and he can live in community with his neighbors. I'm not, it's the same situation there. Uh, and so again, when we privatize and put market forces in, like you said, it puts blockers up. And who are the people that are blocked by it? The people that I think are already the most left behind. Black and brown folks, people who have, less economic spending power. It's just all of these people who are sort of outside, people who are immigrants, people who don't speak English as a first language and have, we're fortunate enough to have some translation services through IPS, but we don't have every language covered. And again, with these complicated systems, they are the people who are left behind.
Yeah, yeah. Black and brown kids, people of limited economic means.
Yeah,
When you're talking in an education context, you get the kids with disabilities or
absolutely.
IEPs that have
And that
special
is,
needs,
yeah,
and what you wind up with is the charter schools and the private schools get to pick their students, and the public schools have to serve everybody, and it winds up where they're only serving those who have no other options, right? Who get
yeah,
rejected by the choosy schools,
that's,
and and then you wind up, well, why are these schools underperforming? Well, because
yeah.
everybody here has a lot of hurdles, man.
Yep. And they've been systematically disinvested from for years and years. And yes, it is exactly the case that, I have friends who have kids in, say, private schools. And do you know who's coming to those private schools and providing IEPs? It's folks from the public education system, because that is the only structural system that is sort of set up with a requirement to provide those sort of IEPs and that support for students. And you're exactly right. Those are the kids. The kids, a student with autism who has trouble sitting and holding still in class. And they're not going to, you know, be held onto very long by these privatized, and I want to be very clear, I'm saying a charter school is a privatized school. I'm not calling it a private school. So there's these privatized education systems that have sort of financial metrics that they have to hit. Of course, this kid is like, you look, you know, you think about it as it's some big business where people are being laid off and they're the red line on the spreadsheet and they got to go. And so they get shuffled off to a public school where, again, and I just, it comes back to me about this sort of like dignity and respect for the humanity of a person. That is not a system that respects the dignity and humanity of that student. And I think that the only system that can fully, that doesn't have all these perverse financial incentives baked into it, is a fully public system.
And like we had that, right? And we've talked about how they've whittled it down over time, and they've added all
Mhm.
these artificial borders and all these artificial gates and artificial toll booths, right? And then they complain, well, this system's really inefficient. We should do something
Right.
about the way it works.
Yep.
Like we need a single transportation kind of system to deal with all these different kind of schools, and a
Yeah.
single facilities management kind of thing. And it's like, my guy, you're just
Yeah.
trying to reinvent public schools,
Right.
except without the democracy.
Exactly. That is exactly right. I think that it sort of comes full circle, doesn't it? Where it's like, wait, it sure would be nice if we had some sort of centralized control. Well, what if it was controlled by, a board of directors and a CEO, all of whom have a financial stake? It's like, no, that's precisely, not what we need. What we need is, again, democratic community connection, public input, all of these things, and transparency. I think that something that we've been fighting tooth and nail about all of these structures is the actual the transparency. There, to loop back around to the ILEA, a specific part of the legislative sort of charter for the ILEA is that they're not subject to Indiana's open door laws, which means they're not actually required to have public facing meetings. Now, of course,
Wow.
they've had they've sort of given us the breadcrumbs of these sort of listening sessions, but like we've sort of been talking about for the past while, it's
Yeah.
clear that they're not really listening very closely to a lot of us.
Predetermined outcomes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But so they're not, again, this transparency thing. It's like ILEA is not even subject to open door laws. So yeah.
For all of this, for the secrecy, for the let's eliminate all this public input, all this screaming and the rabble and the crowd,
Right.
and just
Right.
let the experts handle it. For all
Yeah.
that, for getting to choose their students and not having to serve everyone. Um, it's not like the outcomes of these privatized charter schools are better.
Right. I mean, if you look at a lot of these sort of education outcomes in the last couple of years, and I mean, setting aside the fact that COVID was like a humongous drag on school performance, I
Yeah.
don't think anybody's going to dispute that. But if you look at the sort of reading performance, the uptick in just the last couple of years, comparing across charters and public schools, I don't personally see a lot of evidence of a significant difference in the education outcomes. And in a lot of public contexts, the outcomes are even better. And it just it education is a challenging space sometimes, rhetorically, because I think everybody in it says, they come back to saying, no, we care most about the students, we want them to have the good outcomes, and I believe that most everybody involved in this really does genuinely want that. But I think that the way we get there is, again, democratic control, transparency, public input. We all have to have a connection to these schools, and in order for these students to continue not only to have the academic performance, but to also have the social, interpersonal connections, to sort of just grow up as a member of society, of a community. I think that's a critically important feature here.
So, if folks in Indianapolis are concerned about this, if they share that vision for well-funded public schools with a modicum of democracy in the process, what should we be
Yeah.
doing?
Well, we have. I come to you today with one really big sort of call to action, and that's a pretty short, near-term call to action, and that is on December 17th. That's next Wednesday, at 6 p.m. on the second floor of the Indianapolis City County Council building. We have the final meeting of the ILEA. This is the meeting in which the ILEA is going to vote on their sort of legislative proposals that are going to then be pushed on to the state legislature. Again, I want to remind you, Republican supermajority state legislature. So I don't think we've got, we have some allies in there, but we don't have a lot. Uh, and so the big ask is, if you can, please come out on the 17th. We need to pack this room with pro public school advocates. Wear red. I know you've probably heard the phrase wear red for ed. Wear every bit of red that you have. Bring a sign. Now, just a forewarning, the signs have to be small. I think it's 11 by 22 inches, and they can't be cardboard. They have to be able to be rolled up. No sticks, none of that. It'll just get swiped when you come in by the folks at the door. But that's all but yes, our big ask is just come in and please be there. And if you feel the confidence or the desire, there is a public comment period during this meeting. You can sign up online. The public comment is limited to 60 seconds, so make sure you prepare your statement for that. And I should say that if you are saying, I want to talk, but I don't feel confident, or I don't know if I have all the details or all the information, when I say we, I mean DSA, Democratic Socialists, our fully funded, fully public committee, we've got a program that has been fighting on behalf of public education for the better part of a year. We have resources to help you craft a statement. If you don't feel confident, if you want some details, if you want history, we've got all this information. We can help you out because we need as many voices as we can on behalf of public education next Wednesday.
If folks can't make it there physically on Wednesday, are there some inboxes they need to blow up?
Yes, I mean, members of the ILEA, their names and information is going to be public online. We've already talked about Mayor Hogsett's one member of the ILEA. I don't know if we actually specifically said that. But all of the folks on the board, in particular, these sort of pro-charter voices, Maggie Lewis, Barato Britt, who's involved with KIP, one of the charters here, Bart Peterson, Hogsett, all of those folks, I blow up their inboxes as best you can. And then there also is a online link for public comment that usually goes live a day or two in advance of the meeting. So the meeting's on Wednesday. If you just search ILEA Indianapolis Public Schools, you'll go right to the page, and there should be a link there starting Monday or Tuesday where you can put a virtual statement in. And yeah, actions like that, if you can't make it out, I mean, I get it. That's another great way to help push on this. And the other thing is, the other call to action that I really want to make is if you want to be able to help make movements on behalf of public education, please reach out to either us, the Democratic Socialists of America, through our fully funded, fully public campaign, or to one of our coalition partners. That's the IEA, if you're a teacher, the Indianapolis Education Association in Indianapolis, IPS Parent Council, Concerned Clergy. These are all folks who are part of a coalition fighting on behalf of public education. Please reach out to them. If you can't make it next week, we're going to have more to do coming in the new year because, of course, the legislative session is going to start in the new year.
Indeed. Tayler, is there anything we missed here today that we need to make sure we get on the record before we got to go?
Let me make sure here. I think that something that's important to know, I mentioned the next legislative session. It's going to be a short legislative session this year. We're not going to have, I know that maybe, I don't know, to me, last year, the legislative session felt like it dragged on forever and ever. And every week there was some new awful bill. This is going to be a short legislative session. So we're going to have to mobilize quickly. There's going to be a lot of need for community input. There's going to be a lot of need for calling reps, being at the State House, all of these types of moves about all these bills that are going to be coming up, not even just the one that is probably going to follow after the ILEA recommendation, but there are other bills coming up. I saw one representative has created a bill for putting private advertisements on school buses because to raise money for public education. I think that's a ridiculous bill. So getting involved, again, like I said, with us, the Democratic Socialists, or with any of our other coalition partners, Parent Council, Concerned Clergy, IPS Parent Council, all of us are going to be working to fight sort of on behalf of public education with this upcoming legislative session. So now's a great time to get involved.
Very good. Absolutely. It's not just IPS. It's not just Indianapolis. I mean, you guys are under direct fire right now, and we need people out, at the city county building on Wednesday. But the State House is closing rural school districts down.
Yes.
They are trying to shut down entire districts up in Gary.
Unilaterally.
I mean, those bills got defeated last year, but with these guys, you know how it is. They keep on introducing them again and again and again, try and push them through when folks aren't looking.
Yes, I think that that's exactly right. I mean, I think you can think of it as, I mean, I think it was HB 1136, which was going to close something like 20% of schools last year. You can think of it as of them trying to sort of push this over to the window.
Absolutely. Taylor, give me one last pitch. Where can folks go for more information, and where can they find about you, the the Indiana IPS, like Parents Council and DSA?
Yes. So to reach out to the DSA, Central Indiana DSA, the organization that I'm a part of, you can search Central Indiana DSA online. That's going to take you to our website, which I think is Central in DSA. I should know this. It's either .org or .com. But if you just
Show
Google it,
notes.
you'll find it. We're on Instagram. IPS Parent Council. I believe, again, I think that they are on Instagram as well. We'll try to, we can sort of collect some links somewhere so we can have them public facing as well. But there is a form that you can fill out. It's just a Google form that goes to the folks at IPS Parent Council. If you're a parent in IPS and want to get involved there, they're doing a lot of great work. If you're a teacher in Indianapolis, reach out to IEA. And I mean, really, honestly, if you're anywhere in Indiana and you want to reach out on this sort of fighting for a better future that Democratic Socialists are trying to do, and I know a lot of us are sort of energized on this behalf. I at least I am. It's not just Central Indiana that the DSA is. We've got connections throughout the state, and we can help point you in the right direction. If you're in Bloomington, if you're in Muncie, if you're up in Gary, wherever you are in the state, we want to help. So.
Very good. All right. Well, Tayler Sullivan-Peters, I really appreciate you being here with us on the Who's Left podcast today, and I appreciate you fighting for the public schools in this state.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Once again, that was Tayler Sullivan-Peters, a member of Central Indiana DSA and concerned parent of an IPS student. Again, this Wednesday evening, 6 p.m. at the Indianapolis City County Building, ILEA will issue their final recommendations. Do not let them strip democratic governance from the democratically elected school board and hand it over to profit-seeking charter merchants. If you can't make it in person, comment via the ILEA website. I encourage you to do so. Fight the power in solidarity. This has been the Who's Left podcast. I'm Scott Aaron Rogers. Love each other, Indiana.